Episode 79 opens with a bird circling over Shiganshina, the universal symbol for freedom in the series. And right from the get-go, this episode is really interesting in that it kind of undermines its own premise in a way. When you're watching a flashback, especially when you go all the way back to childhood, you expect to see some kind of tragic twist or explanation for why a character is the way they are. And that is doubly true for Attack on Titan that has always used children as a symbol for absolute and unfiltered raw beliefs. And that is where this flashback comes in, because we go through Eren's entire life. Yes, the cabin is there, which did change Eren, but within this episode's narrative, there is no twist or big revelation to explain something that might have happened. And so naturally, our focus once again shifts to Grisha, but this time with an entirely different dimension that includes his true perspective we last saw atop the wall. And actually, not to disrupt the causality of this video, we'll talk about the causality of Grisha's true perspective later in the video because this is the intro. Aside from that though, there is also some very clear mirroring between Zeke and Eren. The first ever scenes we saw of baby Zeke were him sleeping peacefully, with Grisha saying that he will surely lead them to victory. With Eren on the other hand, as soon as Grisha picks him up, he starts screaming and crying. Even as a baby, he was yearning for that independence. And this would be contrasted yet again with Eren's birth, where we would see him sleep peacefully, just like Zeke, except Grisha would say that he is free, rather than the restorationist lead them to victory. Which is a very nice segue to Zeke saying that he will show Eren just how brainwashed he is, obviously not realizing that Grisha truly lived a peaceful life within the walls. Like I mentioned a second ago with the deconstruction of a typical flashback, throughout this episode, this fundamental mismatch in expectations becomes another powder keg just waiting to go off. Zeke's entire worldview, his view on his own upbringing, all the justifications he used to protect himself from the trauma he went through will be shattered all over again. This episode is all about that slow burn, about slowly making you feel like that it just doesn't quite add up until we begin to question, well, literally time and reality itself. Like, you can't get more fundamental than that. Zeke watches as a very small Eren chases a butterfly and stumbles into Grisha's hug. Absolutely overanalyzing here, but I think this scene is meant to work as this unseen truth for Zeke. As in, Zeke is looking for some big revelation about Eren's childhood, or how Grisha brainwashed him, or really whatever. But the truth is actually pure and simple. Eren was free. The series has used butterflies as a symbol of nature's cruelty, but here, that butterfly too is free. We just see a young child playing in nature, and that is the reason Eren betrayed him. His desire for this absolute freedom. We then see Grisha doing his doctor duties and trying to get close to the royal family, not unlike his time in Marley, or even the Marley squad right here on Paradis. Remember that this whole restorationist thing started with Grisha being a doctor. But Zeke is most certainly not impressed and says that he knew that if he slipped up, his wife and son would suffer, obviously drawing parallels to his own childhood and Grisha's revolutionary activities. But Eren adds that it's because he's an who'd toss his family into a ditch to restore Eldia. The surface level meaning here is that this is just a extremely shallow lie for Zeke, with him then saying that Zeke has already undone his brainwashing. But really, isn't he describing himself? In his case, it's not about Eldia, but about his own twisted dream of a free world. That is why he has been so numb ever since the medal ceremony. It's because he fully realizes how hypocritical all of his talk of freedoms are. Even if you ignore Grisha, his plans of protecting his friends got Sasha killed, he got Hanji killed. He hurt everyone who had ever cared for him, everyone who had made sacrifices for him. And above all, he sent Dina to kill his own mother. He didn't just throw them in a ditch for his dream, he got them killed. They go through a few more memories, including one of a mildly drunk Hannes playing around with a little Eren, which is very, very sad. And we also catch a brief glimpse of Kenny's squad guarding the royals. Little did they know, with someone like Grisha, their protection wouldn't really mean much. But a short while later, they find themselves at the Crystal Catacombs, with Eren being surprised at just how quickly Grisha tracked down the church. And with this, I have a few different thoughts. Firstly, this could just be Eren preemptively covering up the fact that the massacre of the catacombs doesn't happen yet. As in, the reason why Grisha found this place so extremely early was because of Eren's future memories. But they need to keep going further, so Eren just tries playing dumb. It's weird causality stuff because I say Eren needs to keep going further, but he already has, by definition, gone further in order for this to be possible in the first place. But that's why it's a loop and it's a time paradox, so he kinda needs to go further, but he already has. Alternatively, these could just be memories that are bleeding through time, in the same way that Eren saw his long dream under the tree. Anyone who holds or will ever hold the Founding Titan already exists outside of time. So even if Grisha currently only has the Attack Titan, the effects of the paths and of the Founding Titan could be bleeding through. So yes, Eren might be surprised because he didn't show these things to Grisha, but Grisha would hold the Founding Titan. So there is a decent chance that some of those memories were already nudging him without Eren doing anything. And with that line of thinking, what if Eren is genuinely surprised? In his own words, despite being in the paths and in control of the Founding Titan, the past, present, and future all bleed together and it's impossible to discern what's even truly real. So what if Eren, at this exact point in time, genuinely does not know that he can only get the Founder after Shiganshina, and after he is forced to kill his own mother? Dina is obviously diverted before Eren holds the Founding Titan, so it's impossible to say at which exact point in time that decision would have been made. As for the actual reason Grisha waits so long, there are two different things. One of them is Eren's causal loop. Eren must be that traumatized and then radicalized child if he is ever to go through with the rumbling and even end up here in the first place. If Eren doesn't reach the paths, it means Kruger never speaks to Grisha, which means Grisha never gets the Titan, and causality is broken. While still in Marley, there was wiggle room in those causal effects, and we could debate whose causality this actually was, but the moment Grisha lands on Paradis, he is entirely bound by Eren. But in terms of character motivations, I think the likeliest scenario is actually that Grisha tried to delay this attack on the catacombs for as long as possible. Not because he knew of exactly what's to come, but because he wanted to avoid it, just like Eren does with the rumbling. Zeke would later describe this as him getting cold feet and not being able to use the Founding Titan. But really, I think all he wanted to do was stop the future that he already glimpsed. And to immediately illustrate that, Grisha came home from the chapel and immediately cried as he just held Eren. It will be, or I guess already was, his child that will bring down the walls and herald Ragnarok. I think much of this episode is kind of Grisha's Ramsey moment, the thing that confirms that the future cannot be changed. He can cry, he can beg for forgiveness, he can try to do things differently, but nothing will ever change. And then there is also the shot of baby Eren directly looking up at future Eren, which is very, very ominous. Zeke, however, focuses on a much different thought, saying Grisha delayed his plan out of love for his second son. Suddenly, insecurity about his own life and worth starts creeping in. Remember that in Marley, he was never enough to make Grisha proud. Never fast enough, never strong enough to have any hopes of becoming a warrior. He had spent the rest of his life with the belief that Grisha was just a terrible father with no regard for human life. Even Marley at large echoed that same belief. It was the only thing that allowed him to cope with his own childhood. But here he is, watching Grisha display genuine love and care for a different son. Obviously, we know that Zeke was 100% a victim and Grisha was a terrible father. But naturally, Zeke can't quite remove himself from the equation, and the question of, was I the problem, naturally pops up. But because this is Isayama, nothing can ever be simple, so to directly challenge that, Grisha starts mumbling in his sleep, repeatedly asking for forgiveness.
Zeke! Even if Zeke could get here, he wouldn't be old and bearded. You're dreaming.
This is Grisha's long dream. Glimpses of a terrifying but inevitable future. And very fittingly, Eren is now the one pushing Zeke along, saying to go on to the next memory. Before we do that, quick side notes. When Grisha is looking at things weirdly or describing Zeke or whatever, remember that he is not truly seeing these things. He's only getting glimpses of Eren's perspective looking back at him. That's why he repeatedly describes how Zeke looks while never describing anything about Eren. It's because every single memory he gets is Eren's first-person view of Zeke and himself. And also, on the note of Grisha's long dream and the terrifying, inevitable future that lay before him, I think it's also worth very briefly recapping the 4 completely different versions of Grisha that we have seen. Throughout the first season, he was just some insane, mysterious weirdo who put the burden of a Titan and the burden of killing his own father on Eren. His motives were largely mysterious, but his actions painted him as maybe not quite a villain, but certainly a cruel father with no real care for just how much his son would suffer. And that would just escalate into Season 3, until we suddenly learned that he himself was a victim. He lost his little sister to the barbaric cruelty of Marley. He was brainwashed by his grandparents and was beaten down at pretty much every step of his life. His actions were clearly not perfect and very extreme, but there was an attempt at protecting the island. Now in Season 4, we again flip back and learn that his actions as an Eldian revolutionary weren't exactly noble and came at the cost of his own son. No matter how much he told himself that he would make things right, he did the same exact things as his grandparents. He was a terrible father who, instead of protecting his son from the cruelty of the world, tried to use him as nothing more than a weapon, only to do the same exact thing with Eren. And with this episode, we flip back yet again. We see Eren's childhood as a completely ordinary one. They ate together, not with some lecture, but as just a family. He played with him, watched his first steps. It was all completely ordinary. And while yes, he was still acting as a pseudo-spy, none of it was ever destructive to those around them, at least not in the short term. With every new memory they witness, the truth slowly begins to emerge, because throughout all of this, there is something that is missing. One piece that would make everything fit. One which we'd soon learn to actually be Eren. Or was it really? Was it him who's okay, not yet, let's not jump ahead. And yes, that was just the cold open. As for the title of the episode, Memories of the Future, it's both very simple but also very paradoxical. The obvious meaning here is just Grisha's memories of the future, since, you know, that's like the entire episode. That's where it ends, that's the big twist. But saying that, an equal, if not greater part of Grisha's memories are Eren's future memories that he gets during the medal ceremony. And with the benefit of hindsight, I mean, wouldn't Ymir's memories be the most important here? But okay, let's not talk about that now, that is next episode. No need to overcomplicate anything, this episode is plenty complicated as is. We are talking about Grisha's memories of the future. Moving into the episode itself, the Jaeger duo continue wandering through memories, with Zeke again being surprised that Eren was never brainwashed or recruited into the Restorationists. But before we talk about story, there is a big sub versus dub question here. In the sub, Eren says that it was pointless that they wandered 4 years in his memories, whereas the dub says,
"Your years of his memories for nothing."
Both the manga as well as the machine gods of Google Translate say 4 years, so the sub is more accurate in this situation. Maybe this is just an outcome of me overanalyzing like literally everything, but what I'm getting at here is that these memories are not as disconnected as we see with Zeke and Eren just walking through doors and the dub kinda sorta implies. We are not actually cutting between baby Eren and then just 9-year-old Eren. For the most part, Eren growing up from a baby all the way to 9-10 years old has been continuous. AKA, Zeke and Eren literally spent thousands of hours together doing this. Assuming they spend just 8 hours going through every day, it's still 29,000 hours of this. Not quite as much as I have logged in World of Warcraft, but still an insane amount of hours. This is why every user of the Founding Titan, or I guess in this case, someone who gets roped into using the Founding Titan, inevitably either loses their marbles or just becomes numb. They can spend a lifetime in a different body while time doesn't move a second. Also, and I know this is like completely random, but the single biggest mistake Isayama ever made was not putting Grisha's reaction to meeting Armin and Mikasa for the very first time. My guy must have been close to fainting the moment Eren mentioned meeting an Armin. Like, imagine hearing Kruger be like, "You have to protect Mikasa and Armin. I don't know who they are though. They're from somewhere down the line." And then one day your son just comes home, "Hey dad, I made a new friend. His name's Armin." Bro was rattled. As they continue their path down Little Memory Lane, Zeke again asks why Eren betrayed him. because even now, the answer cannot be found in their memories. Again, there is no moment of transformation, and so Eren just says he has been this way ever since he was born, as we cut to the cabin. He says that they are not the same, he is not a little brother in need of protection, and that he has always been free. If anyone dared take that freedom away, he would take theirs first. That is pretty much the Attack Titan and Eren summarized as briefly as possible. But this is also something that I think keeps getting overlooked or deliberately ignored by many people talking about the series and the rumbling more broadly. When all is said and done, Eren never cared about the people of Paradis or their deterrence capabilities or strategic intentions or really any of that. What he always cared about were individual freedoms in an absolute sense. That's exactly why he rejects any plan that involves turning his friends into Titans, even if it is the objectively correct option for the freedom of Paradis. That belief is so important to him that he refuses even the most basic example of the greater good, the entire backbone of what the Scouts have been doing for the past 100 years. If we're truly talking about the freedom of the island and the freedom of their people as a whole, had Armin been fed to Historia, they'd have the rumbling with no strings attached, and in turn, a deterrent the world simply cannot match. But Eren refuses that, not just because Armin would be dead and Historia would be in 13 years, but because the inheritance of the Titans and the royal blood would continue. In his mind, the next generation would never be truly free as he imagines it, even if practically it almost certainly would be. They would have a deterrent. Which leads us onto big point number 2. Those beliefs are hypocritical, not even consistent, and almost entirely selfish. Yes, he saved Mikasa, he saved Historia, and he, quote-unquote, protected his immediate friend circle. But his own twisted freedom got Sasha, Hanji, and countless others of his own people killed. He knowingly manipulated them into his plan. He robbed his own friends of that freedom that he so desperately craves himself. Sasha died carrying out his plan. She never did anything to inhibit his freedom. She fought for it countless times throughout the years. But he didn't care. Well, actually, Eren did care. He cared a lot, in fact, but little radicalized kid piloting Ragnarok didn't, so he did, but he also kinda didn't. It's complicated. That's why his beliefs are paradoxical and contradictory. That's the whole point of the Founding Titan. Ditto for his mom, who did nothing wrong, yet she had to die for him to end up in those clouds in the first place. Ditto for every innocent child beyond the walls who has never even heard of Paradis in their lives. No matter how much he tries to present this absolute freedom, it was never about freedom. It was about his, or maybe her, freedom. The freedom of a child who had lost everything and fought for nothing more than survival. A child who got their hands on a power that could wipe the world clean. True freedom from the suffering of life and the cruelty of mankind. Yes, I'm talking about Amir. Put a pin in that. Eren calls Zeke a pathetic man still haunted by his dead father. Again, this is kinda pretty obvious irony. Eren too hates Grisha for ever burdening him with the Titan. He cried as Hannes was torn apart because all that power meant nothing. He cried in the Crystal Catacombs saying he never should have become this, and he cried to Ramsey when he couldn't even stop himself. His entire life, he has been haunted by ghosts. Every step he has ever taken has been one of inherited rage and hatred. But suddenly, the insults, the arguments, they all stop, and the scene becomes dead silence. Eren just stands there, watching his kid self and Mikasa. The thing that truly mattered. The only memory that he doesn't pull away from.
It's warm.
Zeke apologizes, saying that he will never abandon Eren. Before they save the world, he will save him, just like Saver. And as he says this, they see a boy and a father playing ball, just like Zeke did that day. They watch Grisha make the book that they would find in Season 3, but a moment later, Grisha stares at Eren with the key in hand. Okay, all seriousness aside, I find it kinda hilarious that bro was literally just getting random third-person shots of himself beamed into his head. Remember that Grisha is not in the paths. All he sees is Eren's point of view just staring at himself. Can you imagine just sitting there and then suddenly... third person. And with that, we finally catch up to Episode 1, I guess. Very weird to say, but yes, we do catch up with the events of episode 1, and sheesh, did Mappa have attention to detail with these scenes. They are replicated absolutely beautifully, even down to the frames at which they move. But naturally, each and every scene here is entirely recontextualized. Grisha's eyes are full of fear as Eren says that he doesn't want to live in the ignorance of the walls. When Eren says, the lives of all who have died will be for nothing, Grisha's eyes quiver, but if you take away the glasses, that is Marley Grisha, the LD restorationist. This is the moment that he had been working toward. He had always hoped that his son would free their people. Standing in the doorframe, Grisha promises to finally show Eren the basements, as we focus on the key. This shot unfortunately isn't as perfect because in Wit's adaptation, Carla was standing right there in the doorframe and there wasn't actually any room for future Eren. In episode 1, the scene does cut to close-ups after that, so him looking at future Eren is still kinda there by omission, but it's nowhere near as clear-cut as it is in the manga, where Grisha's eyes were always diverted, even in chapter 1. But the absolute best part here has to be that smash cut to the dusk as he enters the Crystal Catacombs. The entire episode has had Zeke and Eren in the forefront, but with the key scene just now, they never speak, they just watch. And so this violent cut to Grisha's half mortified, half ready to murder face is so good. And the constant ebbing and flowing of the music in the background and the birds all fleeing as if something has already happened is just oh good. This entire first half of the episode is just a masterclass in slowly but surely building toward something completely incomprehensible. It will never hit quite the same on a rewatch because this really is a one-in-a-lifetime thing, but the entire episode has been planting these scenes of characters just staring, always leaving something unsaid. Slowly building that tension. And with this final cut, it's pretty much gloves off from here. Except Attack on Titan does it again. We first cut to the Midcard detailing the coordinates. This one's very brief, with it just noting that the passage of time in the paths is both instantaneous and infinite at the same time. We already heard this from Zeke, and now we're literally wandering around for years, so this is just stating that very explicitly. But if you wanted to extensively overanalyze this, you could start drawing on Plato's philosophy and the distinction between time and reality. Plato suggested that time is not a fundamental reality, but rather just a temporal reflection of a true atemporal reality. Similarly, the paths function as a timeless, eternal dimension, the true eternity from which the real world is merely a projection. Everything, the past, the present, and future, coexist. Every memory, every consciousness is a single, unified reality. It's only when they are projected outwards that we get what is actual reality. And in case instead of philosophy you happen to prefer science, the paths could also be drawing on the idea of general relativity. If an object were to move at the speed of light, theoretically, time would essentially completely stop for an external observer, thereby creating two entirely different subjective experiences of the passage of time. That is kind of the inverse effect of what we see in Attack on Titan, but the idea is largely the same, and fundamentally different experiences of the flow of time is just a really cool basis for a story. So, maybe. Unlike a lot of other magic things in Attack on Titan, there is no direct one-to-one in Norse mythology, so I think the paths are kind of a blend of multiple philosophical elements mixed with the character motives of Ymir, which, again, we'll get to next time. Returning to the episode, we immediately see Grisha just begging them to do something, anything, before his children and wife are killed. This is his version of that one last attempt to change the future he has seen. But just like Eren, everything would always play out exactly as he saw in his memories of the future. He delayed his attack on the royal family. He tried giving his son a completely normal life, yet none of it seemed to matter. The future remained just as bleak. And watch Frida's eyes here. As Grisha begs them to do something, they're always blue. There is emotion in them, fear, then confusion, then even guilt, but then there is drive. The moment she even considers doing anything, her eye turns purple, and every bit of emotion is drained from her face.
And we, as subjects of Ymir, must now reap the wages of our sins.
This is the vow to renounce war in action. A complete mental seal that stops independent thoughts for the royal founding titan holders. And because this episode is already insane, I also want to do a little bit of insane overanalysis about said mental seal. The stated and most certainly actual reason why the vow to renounce war exists is just Karl Fritz, as we've discussed at length in prior episodes. But even saying that, what if there is something entirely else going on? In many monumentous occasions throughout the series, particularly ones involving memory shenanigans or the Founding Titan directly, we see purple flowers. The color purple has historically always been a color of royalty, so it makes sense that it would also be the universal color for the Founding Titan. But as we'd see in Ymir's story, her servitude to royalty isn't exactly, well, noble. So what if the color purple is meant to reflect Ymir's inhibited free will? An almost sick joke to those attempting to wield her power. It wouldn't be the first time she has rebelled against authority after all, even while already a slave. And wouldn't you know it, the only person whose eyes never turn purple is Eren, the person who would set her free. But that actually doesn't make a lot of sense because Eren was no more free than anyone else and his brain was also scrambled by the Founding Titan, so that's too much overanalyzing. Frida, now fully bound by the vow, pretty much explains that humans are territorial monkeys and that the power of the Titans can never fall into their hands, saying to save the world, they must pretty much just die out. Z casually notes that he agrees wholeheartedly, but that the message clearly fell on deaf ears, as Eren had already told him about this exact memory. And right on cue, we cut to Eren's very locked-in eyes. The series is still doing its famous dance with us, so the conversation continues back and forth, until we again cut to Grisha's mortified face, and the very locked-in Eren behind him. This is finally the breaking point of that subtle tension that had been building all throughout the episode. Finally, Grisha's strange behavior comes to a boiling point as his eyes roll back to Eren, and we briefly hear the rumbling going on in his head. Something is about to give. Somewhere deep inside, he feels his future being written. His body now chained to that unbreakable causality. And we continue that dance, with Frida just commenting that even if he stole the Titan, he wouldn't be able to use it. Grisha cuts her off saying he's already aware, but that every Titan has its own ability, including the Attack Titan. And as he says this, we see Eren just casually walking past. I love just how simple this scene is, because it is also insane, and the contrast is insane. Throughout all of these memories, Eren has been dismissive and passive. He doesn't move around or really do anything. So with this scene, I think him just simply walking past her view, again, just is off. Finally, everything fits into place. The rumbling in his head, the stare that seemed to burn a hole in everything,
offers us brief glimpses into the lives of those yet to inherit it.
He can witness the future?
One question that immediately pops up is, why does the Attack Titan even exist if it opposes the king? Ymir's entire deal was eternal servitude, right? The way I always read it is that the Attack Titan is a manifestation of Ymir's desire for freedom. It is an aspect of her that marched throughout time to finally liberate her from the shackles that she created. In order to survive, she gave herself a powerful body. She gave herself powerful weapons and armor, endurance to fight many battles, even if she has to physically claw her way out. But above all, she dreamt of something to finally set her free. She escaped to a world where time did not exist and waited for that someone. That is the Attack Titan. A Titan that exists outside of the Founding Titan's curse of causality and would destroy the world she built. Plenty more on this in the Attack Titan reveal episode and also next time, but that is where Eren's beliefs of these individual freedoms comes in, and why he is the one to reach her. That being said, there is also that angle of longing and love that never was, but we'll leave that for next time because the whole Ymir seeking connection angle is also very, very important. Grisha says that she is bound by the vow and cannot act, saying this is where he ends the royal bloodline. Except, he stops. Also, note Frida going to chomp on her hand, which is almost certainly where Eren gets his technique all the way back in Season 1. Grisha falls to his knees, saying he's a doctor, he helps people, he can't do this. Zeke naturally begins to question reality, saying Grisha has the Founding Titan, the past cannot change. And that's when we get the biggest reverse Uno, with Eren walking up and basically doing the Kruger speech again. Importantly though, the question of who started the story is already hugely recontextualized and will be recontextualized again with the following episode. Eren pushes Grisha with Faye's story, the moment where he was radicalized, but Eren's own actions are not influenced by Faye, right? His life will be defined by the loss of his mother and by the fall of Shiganshina, but that is yet to happen. Let's break all this down because there's still a ton of confusion about the mechanics and symbolism of all this. First and foremost, the past was never altered throughout this episode. It was always altered because all of this is a causal loop created by, primarily, the Founding Titan, but stretched even further back with the Attack Titan. It's really weird to wrap your head around, but think of it this way. If Eren scares Grisha into not giving him the Titan, well then, Grisha is never scared into not giving him the Titan, therefore he gives him the Titan, therefore Eren scares Grisha into not giving him the Titan. It's a loop and it's a paradox. So how does the Attack Titan figure into all of this? Before we tackle that, very brief lore recap on their powers because these two are somewhat misunderstood. The Attack Titan can choose to send back memories to past inheritors. So, from a past inheritor's point of view, he will be getting memories from a future inheritor. This is how Kruger knew of Armin and Mikasa while never having any kind of weird and wacky things going on. The only things he saw were the memories that Eren specifically sent back. The Founding Titan, on the other hand, transcends all of those boundaries. If you will ever hold the Founding Titan, you always have, and you already do, as seen with Eren's dream long before he ever holds a single Titan. So, on a conceptual level, like we talked about a second ago with Ymir's desires manifested through the Titans, I always saw the Attack Titan's future sight as a direct counter to the Founding Titan's future sight, and in turn, the capturing of all 9 Titans by a single party. From the very beginning, the Titans originated from Ymir's spirit to simply survive. So I think the Attack Titan is that primal drive to survive, even against its own peers and even across time itself. Marley never controlled the Attack Titan, and clearly even the royal family of Paradis didn't know about the extent of its power, and I think that is exactly because it was meant to transcend the causal loop. It is the same reason why I think the Titans as a whole cease to exist once the Founding Titan and the Attack Titan are used in conjunction. Eren himself might have succumbed to the mind-bending memory soup of the Founder, but the story they started kept moving forward with or without them. It was the Attack Titan that liberated the Founder from its own grasp. The problem is that disentangling the exact effects of the Founder and the Attack Titan is borderline impossible because they both end up with Eren, who is in the paths, aka all memory shenanigans are possible. But purely practically speaking, the Attack Titan was simply a vehicle to get Grisha to where he is now. But alright, you can talk about all the weird mind-bending mechanics for hours. Very short version is that this is a loop, there was never any kind of past alteration, this is the way it has always been. What I think is much more important is what Isayama was actually trying to say with this. Whenever you're dealing with time travel of really any kind, things can get extremely messy very quickly. As soon as you introduce any kind of past alteration, you must immediately rethink pretty much the entire story. Is it a story about the butterfly effect, in which case changing things is the entire story, or is it a story about achieving some kind of outcome in the future, in which case you either need fixed elements or the story kind of falls apart because you could just like literally do anything until you get the right outcome. That's why time travel's hard. That being said, the central themes of Attack on Titan have always been inheritance, free will or lack thereof, and existential philosophy in a cruel and dangerous world. And because Attack on Titan is fundamentally a fantasy story, you can personify or otherwise convey abstract things in very tangible powers/objects. And so, what I think the Founding Titan, and the Rumbling more broadly, was meant to represent was the inherited hatred of an entire people personified in a single character. It is the rage of Ymir, of Grisha, of Eren, every child who believed that the only way to survive was to destroy everything and anyone who stood in their way. Functionally locking them into this timeline is merely to make us ask, at what point does free will end and a logical outcome based on prior circumstances begin? Purely in terms of the show's message, the rumbling was never inevitable because of a fixed timeline. It became inevitable because of radicalization. Scenes like the conversation between Eren and Armin or Eren and Ramsey are merely there to show us every step of it. Start, middle, and even after. That is what fantasy is all about. The human condition dressed up in a shinier and often impossible and contradictory form. And I think that's exactly why the topper of this entire story is the reveal that Eren killed his own mother. Eren, as a character, is a single personification of this endless cycle. It is a fundamental paradox that cannot be escaped. The series does give you glimpses of hope and ways of stopping the cycle, but at the end of the day, this story is still a tragedy. It starts and ends with a destruction of an entire people. So yes, the Crystal Catacombs twist is super spicy and everything, but the paradox doesn't happen because Eren is a time wizard. It happens because that tide of hatred was going to blow either way. The Eldia Restorationists, anti-Marleyan volunteers, the Jaegerists, all of these are just forms of the same thing. But alright, now we're like really stuck in the weeds, so let's pull back. Throughout this whole catacomb craziness, we repeatedly see flashbacks to the medal ceremony, which finally explains the question of why Eren suddenly changed. That is in fact because his future self sent his past self to eat his further past self and then pass on Titans to his other past self. Oh yeah, and I guess also something about the rumbling. And also side note, the way manga depicts those flashes of Historia's hand is really cool. As Grisha crawls out, he just screams at the sky, and man, the editing here is chef's kiss. The way they use those sudden abrupt cuts to make even singular movements feel discontinuous is so good. But as Grisha just continues to spiral, he cries out to Zeke, saying, from this point on, only Eren will get what he wants. Again, this is Grisha's Ramsey moment. He tried to change things, so many times he tried, but the flaw of causality was always there. He says it outright, saying he could have never imagined something so terrible. And as he finally sees Zeke, he just cries, begging for his forgiveness and saying that he was a terrible father. He begs him to just stop Eren when he knows he can't. This is that paradox we just talked about. The desire to stop himself from the things that he has already done. The vengeance over Faye that continued to barrel forward for years and years. And another side note, while we see Grisha actually hug Zeke, it's not a real hug per se. Just like with the basement, what Grisha is seeing is himself and Zeke from the perspective of Eren. He can obviously infer that Eren is standing right there, but he is nothing more than a camera, if you will. And as if everything in this episode didn't make it painfully clear just how cooked things were, as tears swell up in Zeke's eyes, he calls Grisha,
Oh, Father.
Considering pretty much every single time Zeke has mentioned Grisha, he has described him as that father, or that man, or any other way to distance himself, I think this very much tells you that he is at his breaking point. At this point, nothing makes sense for Zeke. He had lived his entire life believing that he and Eren were both victims of Grisha. He wanted to save Eren, to make him understand why the euthanasia plan would finally bring them peace. But none of it was true. Ever since Xaver, he was alone. And so finally reuniting with Grisha is a bizarre moment of catharsis. And with a brief cut back to Eren in the ceremony, we return to the paths for the final Reverse Uno. And with that, that is episode 79. Okay, quick story time because you're not getting any more yappers from me. I had to leave my house for a grand total of about 7 hours this week. I know sounds very scary, but because of that, my entire production schedule has been messed up. So that kind of explains if you were ever wondering how cooked my production schedule is. Few hours and I'm cooked. So yes, with that, I want to give a massive thank you to our current patrons and YouTube members who allow me to produce even more of these for you all. And let's also give a warm welcome to the newest members of the team. Company sent me a list. Stefan, African Swiss Roll, good name, Dominic Accorado, I think, and Andrew Berkey. I think. Without you, there'd be a whole lot less of my rambling, so seriously, thank you, thank you. Other than that, I want to say thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.